Newsfeed PM continues now. We turn to this story. The water crisis in Hammanskraal, north of Pretoria, has once again come into the spotlight. Now, this area has now been declared safe in terms of water supply. The city of Tshwane this week urged residents in the area supplied by the Klipdrift Magalies water package plant not to consume the water after complaints of poor quality were received. Water supply to the area was disrupted after a severe storm cut power to the plant. Repairs have now been completed, the system flushed, and laboratory tests show the water quality is safe for consumption. The plant is part of a phased project to provide piped drinking water to Hammanskraal. The other 3 phases are due to be completed later this year. Now, Water and Sanitation Deputy Minister Sello Tlolo is calling for urgent intervention to curb the pollution happening near the Hartbeespoort Dam. The Deputy Minister visited the dam yesterday to assess progress on the 3-year rehabilitation program conducted by the Magalies Water. He says municipalities must also play their part in curbing pollution into dams.
The one issue that I'd wanted to refer to is just the amount of pollution that is coming through the dam from upstream. Now, catchments don't have municipal boundaries, as is the case with your Ekurhuleni, City of Tshwane, Mogale City, and Rand West. And once the polluted water, raw sewage, flows from these particular municipalities, it comes through to in terms of the Crocodile River and that particular inlet of the Crocodile River. If you drive up close enough to the Crocodile River inlet of the dam, you see the amount of toxins, and you actually see the toxicity bubbling because of the amount of pollution that is coming. So that's the biggest crisis that the dam is currently facing. But that can't be addressed by the Department of Water and Sanitation. It must be addressed by the municipalities.
Tlolo says that the department is strengthening regulatory measures to hold polluters accountable.
Remember, as the Department of Water and Sanitation, we also have a regulatory role that we need to play in as far as the National Water Act is concerned. And that involves being able to issue notices, pre-directives and directives to municipalities and as far as their submission of corrective action plans are concerned, so that they're able to take control of the final effluent quality that is released from their wastewater treatment infrastructure. Currently, that is not the case. Even if we do open criminal cases against these municipalities and we go to court and we win the case and the municipalities are fined a certain amount, it really doesn't stop the actual pollution from happening. So the root cause, whilst of course I mentioned wastewater treatment infrastructure, that is mainly the biggest polluter, but we also have industries, we also have mines, we also have agricultural runoff that also contributes to the pollution that is happening.
Stay with water issues now. The Rand Water is warning residents of Johannesburg, Ekurhuleni and Tshwane to reduce their consumption. The water utility says water levels have been dropping at an alarming rate. In Johannesburg, residents in some parts of the city have been without water for several days now. The city says this was due to a power cut that affected the Eikenhof pump station. Let's speak now to Prof. Mike Muller, former Water Director General. Prof, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. As I'm saying there, we are hearing that the water levels at some reservoirs, especially in Ekurhuleni and Eikenhof, are not at the right level of supply, and this is brought down to an electrical fault. However, I hear a bigger conversation that is going on that says it's actually also an aging infrastructure which is made worse by a financial difficulty that makes us not to be able to actually do the necessary maintenance. What is it exactly that is behind this crisis?
Okay, good afternoon to you and your viewers. Look, 10 years ago, we should have started Lesotho Highlands Phase 2. It's very late because various ministers didn't start it when they should. 5 years ago, Premier David Makura said to the Gauteng municipalities, we don't want to have a day zero like Cape Town. You must take some action now to get us ready for the delay that we're going to have. And the municipalities didn't do anything. So we mustn't be surprised that after all of those failures, we're in 2025 and the consumption is going up because there's more people, the amount of water is the same, and now we're having to share that same water between more people. And quite frankly, the municipalities, and Joburg is a case in point, have absolutely failed to work out how to share what we have with the people that are coming into the city and want and need water. So really, this is the end of a long problem, but we're looking for 2 or 3 years having the same issue. More people coming in, same amount of water, and the municipality not working out how to share it between people. Yeah. And I think that's where we see Joburg Water running around, opening valves and closing valves and throttling here and throttling there. Then you get broken pipes and broken equipment, and you interrupt because there are repairs. We really have to take a deep breath and say, how do we get through the next 2 or 3 years? We can't go on like this.
Is it the people's fault? The mayor saying, well, if you look at December's consumption, we did manage to reduce the demand or the consumption to about 1,000 milliliters of water. But he says, for some reason, 1st of February, that whole scenario changed. We are back at 1,700 million liters of water, which is way above what has been rationed for us by the rainwater.
Yeah, and it's true. I stayed in Joburg over December because I knew it was going to be lovely. There was going to be electricity, there was going to be water, because a whole lot of people had gone away. And now they've come back, and factories and offices have started, and schools and universities have started. And so there's more people consuming or trying to consume more water. What we need to do is to recognize that this is a person-made drought. I was going to say man-made, but there's a couple of women who've helped make this drought by not doing the right things at the right time. And when there's a drought, you have to have restrictions. And when you have restrictions, there's a planned approach to take. And I think Joburg and Gauteng, and sometimes I think that the department at national level don't want to admit that now we are in a person-made drought, and we really have to start implementing the kind of restrictions that you have if there is a physical drought. If there's no rain and there's no water in the dams, you introduce interventions. Well, there's water, but the dams aren't big enough yet to cope. So I think that Johannesburg and probably the other Gauteng metros are going to have to introduce restrictions. That means putting up tariffs. That means stopping certain activities. It means discipline in water use. Yeah. And then the municipalities must fix the leaks. They must do it faster. Yeah. They must fix the old infrastructure. And we're trying to get them more money. But that's going to take time. Yeah. And in 3 years, the Lesotho Highlands Phase 2 will be ready. But we don't want it to feed into a dying, decrepit, leaking set of water pipelines. So we really need to start taking serious action now. And I'm not hearing that coming from the mayor or indeed from some of the others. Randwater's warning people, but they don't seem to want to hear the message.
Yeah. So tell me if you think this is serious intervention. From what I'm hearing, the mayor is saying they're doing. One, they are speaking to City Power to say, City Power, come up with an alternative source of power so that we don't have a situation where 48 hours without electricity, reservoirs run dry. Two, they are looking at financial models of how they can get money locally and elsewhere to raise 27 billion, they're saying, to address the backlogs in terms of fixing leakages. Three, they are building reservoirs, one of them being the Brixton, which they're saying will come online quite soon. The fourth thing I think that they're saying they're doing, they're now resorting to putting boreholes, especially in informal settlements, in places like schools, in places like government buildings, to use that as an alternative to getting water supply. Is that adequate?
You know, I'm sorry to say this is much too little, too late. Just let's take the last point about boreholes, because it's one of the few things that might help a little bit for a little bit of the time. The reason that we have this big 100 plus year old Rand water is that 120 years ago, people realized there wasn't enough groundwater in the area of Johannesburg to feed the growing city, and that we'd have to build dams and pipelines and bring water here. So, you know, little boreholes here can help here and there for a few months. But what it won't do is solve the big problem. And really, what the mayor is not saying is that what we are going to need to do is introduce restrictions on water use to bring the level of water use to what is available, rather than carrying on talking about what we might do in the future. Let me just explain one thing about how they're operating the reservoirs which we have at the moment. You see, normally if you're running a proper water company, you keep your reservoirs in your cities between 60 and 80, or maybe even 80 to 90% full, so that if you have a power failure or you have a supply interruption, you've got a stock of water in that tank, and then you can use it for a day or two while things are fixed. What's happening in Joburg at the moment is we run those reservoirs down to 5 or 10%, and then if anything happens, a whole area gets cut off from water. And it's because they are scared to interfere with this flow while there's water in the reservoir, because people then complain, oh, there's water in the reservoir, why are you cutting us off? And the answer to that is we're keeping a reserve in case something like a power failure or a pipe break or something like that happens. We want to have water in that reservoir to keep your supply going for at least a day or two while we fix the problem. But we're not hearing that kind of practical thinking from the mayor, and it's partly because there's this huge confusion, certainly in Johannesburg, where you have Johannesburg Water, it has its own management, its own board of directors, and you have the city, which is supposed to be its owner, but actually collects the money and doles it out and doesn't actually give them enough. We really need to have a proper management, single point, responsible and operational, and then we can avoid what's going on. But I'm afraid we're now living on 10 years of mistakes and failures to act, and we're now going to be forced to act, or we're going to see the sort of spread of these cuts here and there and everywhere, and people getting very angry, as I'm sure you've heard.
Yeah. The president, during the State of the Nation address, speaks of a water crisis task team, akin to that of the one that's dealing with electricity or the one that is dealing with the logistics issues, so a crisis committee of some sort. Is that going to help?
Well, you know, one of the things that is difficult for us, and I talk about us because there's a whole water sector community that's terribly frustrated about the failure to act earlier. The difficulty with water compared to electricity is with electricity, you've got that big brother Eskom and its associates. So you've got 2 or 3 places where if you go and intervene, you really can make a difference. And when they finally did intervene, we saw it made a difference. The trouble with water at the moment is it's split between a couple of 100 municipalities, each of which has their own power and their own budget, and they decide what they want to do. So it's a bit more difficult to intervene. And one of the things that the crisis group is, I think, doing, talking to National Treasury, talking to business, talking to other departments of government, they're saying, how can we now ensure that municipalities run their water supplies properly? And if they don't, how can we then take that responsibility from them? Not that the municipality no longer has any authority over water, but the responsibility to operate and run the systems must be taken and given to somebody who can do that. That could be a private company, and everyone's desperately scared of privatization, or it could be a water board like Rand Water, which has demonstrated that despite all of these problems, it's been able to consistently produce what we need, but it hasn't been given the raw material from Lesotho to provide even more. So, you know, we could have public providers, we could have private providers. What we can't have any longer, frankly, is incompetent municipalities with political interference, only worried about next year's election when they have to worry 5 and 10 years ahead. And frankly, they haven't been doing their job of looking ahead and saying, what do we need to do today to make sure that our citizens have water, have electricity, have roads, you know, in the next 5 years.
Prof. Muller, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on this afternoon. Still on the way here on the News Feed PM.